Way back in the 13th century, something just blotted out the sun. It plunged the entire world into a freezing, dark, and desperate time. And for over 700 years, nobody knew why. This is the story of how we solved that global mystery.
Can you imagine writing that down in the middle of what's supposed to be summer? I mean, this isn't some fantasy novel. This was the terrifying reality for a medieval chronicler in England who was just trying to capture a world that had suddenly and completely gone wrong.
So, what exactly was going on? Well, in the year 1258, historical records from Europe all the way to Asia all started describing the exact same bizarre and devastating events. Look, this wasn't just a bit of bad weather. This was a full-blown global anomaly. The summer of 1258, it just never showed up. Instead, people had to endure this bone-chilling cold and rain that just would not stop, causing harvests to fail on a massive scale. Famine followed right on cue. In fact, archaeologists in London have found huge mass burial pits that date to that exact year, a really grim testament to the thousands who starved. And hanging over all of it was this weird, persistent fog that made the sun look weak and pale. The world had gone dark, and nobody had a clue why. For centuries, that's where the story ended. It was just this historical horror story with no explanation. The first real clue wouldn't pop up until the 1980s. And it wasn't in some dusty library. It was found deep within the polar ice caps. Yeah, the solution to this medieval puzzle was waiting in one of the most remote places on Earth, locked away in what you could call a frozen library of our planet's history. Scientists use these incredible things called ice cores. You should really think of them like time capsules. Every single layer of ice represents a year, and it traps tiny bubbles of air, dust, and this is the crucial part for our story, volcanic particles from that exact moment in time. So when scientists analyzed the ice from the mid-13th century, they found it, a massive, absolutely unmistakable spike in sulfate deposits. And get this, it wasn't just in the Arctic, it was in Antarctica too. The signal was global, and it was dated to one specific year, 1257. That could only mean one thing, a colossal volcanic eruption. And this is where the scale of this thing becomes just mind-blowing. We've all heard of Krakatoa in 1883, right? And Tambora in 1815, which caused its own year without a summer. But the 1257 event absolutely dwarfs them. It pumped more climate-altering sulfur into the sky than any other eruption in the last 7,000 years. This wasn't just a big eruption, it was a planet-altering monster. Okay, so now the scientists had the what, a massive eruption, and they had the when, 1257, but they still didn't have the where. And finding the volcano responsible would kick off a scientific manhunt that went on for more than 30 years. And this was not a quick find. For 3 decades, volcanologists, geologists, and historians were all just stumped. They had this huge geological smoking gun, but the volcano itself seemed to have just vanished from the pages of history. The biggest clue they had was the fact that ash was found at both poles. That meant the eruption had to have happened somewhere in the tropics. Why? Because only there could the stratospheric winds carry all that debris across the entire globe. So that narrowed the search, but it also made the mystery even deeper. Scientists started investigating some pretty major volcanoes. They looked at Okataina in New Zealand, El Chichon in Mexico, and Quilotoa in Ecuador. I mean, each one was a beast with a history of big eruptions. But one by one, they were all ruled out. The timing was wrong, or the eruption just wasn't big enough, or, crucially, the chemical makeup of their ash didn't match the tiny glass shards they found in the ice. The trail just went cold. The breakthrough finally came in 2013, and it came from a place that very few people had even considered. The culprit wasn't some famous volcano. It was one that had been almost totally erased from memory. This right here was the eureka moment. A team led by a French geographer decided to check out the Rinjani volcanic complex on the island of Lombok in Indonesia. They analyzed pumice from a little-known volcano there called Semalis, and when they compared its unique chemical signature to the signature of the ash found in the polar ice cores, boom, it was a perfect match. They had their volcano. And what's amazing is that hard science wasn't the only proof. Researchers soon dug up this ancient local history that confirmed the whole thing. We're talking indigenous chronicles written on palm leaves that told the story of a kingdom that was completely lost. They talk about this apocalyptic eruption, about a mountain literally collapsing, and about the total destruction of the capital city of the Lombok Kingdom, a place called Pamaranta.
These accounts, known as the Babad Lombok, were the missing piece of the puzzle. While chroniclers in Europe were writing about mysterious dark skies, these palm leaf texts were describing the cause right at ground zero. It solved the whole mystery.
So, with Samalas identified as the culprit, scientists could finally piece together the true scale of the 1257 eruption and figure out exactly how it triggered a global catastrophe. Honestly, the numbers are just staggering. This was a VEI 7 eruption. That's ultra-Plinian, which is basically code for the most violent eruption you can imagine. It blasted 40 cubic kilometers of rock and ash into the air, creating a plume that shot 43 kilometers high, right into the stratosphere, and, like we said, the largest sulfur release in millennia. And to put that into perspective for you, just look at this. The famous 1883 Krakatoa eruption was a world-changing event. Samalas is estimated to have been 8 times more powerful. 8 times! That is almost impossible to wrap your head around. So, how did it happen? First, the mountain literally blew its top, completely obliterated. That explosion sent that 43-kilometer-high plume into the stratosphere. On the ground, pyroclastic flows, basically avalanches of superheated gas and rock, raced 25 kilometers to the coast, wiping out everything. But the global effect? That came from all the sulfur in the plume, which formed this massive veil of sulfate aerosols. This veil wrapped around the entire globe, reflecting sunlight back into space and causing temperatures on the ground to plummet. The consequences were just profound. Locally, the Lombok Kingdom and its capital city were literally wiped off the map. Globally, many scientists now believe that this sudden, dramatic cooling was the trigger that kicked off the Little Ice Age, a period of colder global temperatures that lasted for centuries. The ripple effects of this one eruption caused famine, disease, and social chaos all over the world. You know, the discovery of Samalas didn't just solve a 700-year-old mystery. It completely reshaped our understanding of history and revealed the incredible legacy of this geological giant. If you go to Lombok today, you won't find a scary-looking peak. What's left of Mount Samalas is a massive caldera, a huge crater that's now filled with a beautiful, peaceful lake called Sagara Anak. It's so tranquil, and it's hard to believe the unimaginable violence that created it. But the story isn't quite over. Remember that capital city, Pamatan, that was mentioned in the ancient texts? It was completely buried. Archaeologists now call it a potential Pompeii of the Far East, a lost city perfectly preserved under layers and layers of ash, holding the secrets of a kingdom that just vanished. And that leaves us with one last, really tantalizing question. The scientific mystery of the volcano that turned the sky black has been solved. But an archaeological mystery, well, that's just getting started. What stories, what artifacts, what secrets of a lost civilization are still waiting for us, buried deep beneath the shadow of Samalas?